Not because it is inherently a bad thing for folks to move back to the city, so to speak, or to the urban core. After all, I would say I'd rather have people doing that than fleeing and taking all these resources with them. But the downside of gentrification, as we know, is really multiple, right? Number one is that it isn't so much the people moving back as the attitude they bring with them about the space into which they're moving, right? So I think it would be one thing if the people who decided to move back into urban communities, quote unquote, mostly of color and working class, even if they were in large number white folks, if they come with the attitude of solidarity, that we're coming to join and be part of this community and join its struggles and deal with its issues and ask the people there what they want and what they need, that's a very different mentality than coming in and saying, I think what we need is 3 coffee shops on this corner and a Pilates studio. What do y'all think? Like, it's different when you come in and you bring your stuff and you say, what we need is more, I mean, there was this debate in Nashville. I live in Nashville, and on the east side of the river, which is the heavily gentrifying part of Nashville, the hipsterish, sort of artsy part of Nashville, I suppose. And a lot of nice restaurants over there, and they have added something to the community. But many years ago, the problem was there was this debate about Walmart coming in, right? And the white progressives, and again, I have no love lost for Walmart, you heard my speech, right? But the white progressives were all up in arms. Oh, well, Walmart's horrible, and da-da-da-da, and everything they said was true, right? But these were, white folks, many of whom had just moved into East Nashville, and they were bringing their righteous sense of indignation with them. And the black folk who lived in that community, they know that Walmart wasn't the answer to the problem either. They understood that it was exploitative and that the quality of the produce wasn't all that good, but they were going to set up one of their fresh markets, and it was like a produce-focused market. And the black folks in that community said, well, okay, but where are we going to get fresh produce if Walmart doesn't come in here? Are y'all going to open up a market for us? Y'all out there with the signs protesting? What do you want us to do? We don't have burlap bags and a bicycle to go over to the farmer's market like y'all do, on the other side of the river. So we don't have any options. You can't just come in here and tell us we don't have this one outlet for fresh produce. See, that's the mentality. It's not just that people move in, it's they bring a mentality with them. And the second thing, of course, is that it drives up the cost of property in a way that does 2 things. One, right, is that it makes it hard for folks on fixed incomes, particularly seniors, to continue to live in houses that they might own, because even though they own them, the taxes go up and they can't pay the taxes. Or it causes the rents to go up to where folks that are renters get pushed out. So we have to have some protections, whether it's for a community like Flint or whether it's Nashville or anywhere else that's gentrifying. Some of the things I think we could do, for instance, one of the things the cities need to be looking at, one of the reasons in Nashville, I know, and I don't know if it's true elsewhere, but in a lot of communities, one of the problems is for every apartment unit that you build, you have to have so many parking spaces, right? And so in Nashville, for instance, for every unit that you build, you have to have 2 parking spaces. The assumption being that there's 2 cars for every apartment dwelling family. And so that does 2 things. Number one, it increases reliance on vehicles, which is an environmental problem. It also reduces the efficacy of public transportation, which is another problem. But the other thing it does is it takes land out of circulation, because if I have to build a parking lot, right, that's really big for every apartment building that I build, even if the apartments are sort of affordable, or could be, the parking lot now takes out a whole block, or we build a parking garage, it takes out a block that could have been more apartments. So now we're limiting the number of units to make way for cars that don't pay rent. Right? So one of the ways to reduce the price is to say, actually for every unit we build, we're going to build one parking spot for every 2 units. Some of y'all just have to learn how to ride the bus or learn how to walk, and that makes the communities more central and more tighter knit. That's one way. The second way is we have to protect folks' rents and taxes. And I think we could do that, for instance, by saying, I just pick an arbitrary number, that, if you've lived in a community for a certain number of years, maybe 10, maybe 15, whatever it is, and you own your property, that your property taxes, if you've been there the whole time, even when it wasn't hip and it wasn't the place to be and people weren't eyeing it for development, if you've been there a certain number of years, your property taxes will be frozen at the level that they were at the latest millage and the latest assessment, and they'll only go up for a regular cost of living, which is regular standard rate of inflation. That way it won't become unaffordable. And if you're a landlord, right, if you're willing to not go up on rent by more than the rate of inflation, if you're willing to say, hey, I've got these units, I've got 7 houses or 10 apartments or something, and I'm going to keep the rent stable, right? We're not going to necessarily have a law that forces that, because those laws oftentimes don't end up working the way we intend. But if the landlord is willing to say, I will not raise the rent, for as long as that landlord doesn't raise the rent beyond the rate of inflation, they too can continue to pay property taxes at the prior rate. If they're an existing landlord, not a new landlord, an existing landlord, not a developer. And so that way we can protect enough units to where people don't get pushed out and the overall nature of the neighborhood doesn't change. I think if you get involved in those kind of discussions early, as Flint begins to gentrify, that will work to your advantage as opposed to waiting. Right now, we're playing catch up in places like Nashville with that issue. The developers are way ahead of us when it comes to that stuff, so it's important to get ahead of it. Next,